Hey guys, I'm Angela and welcome back to Hobby Night. This week, we're going to be talking about these. That's right, we're going to talk about my top 5 favorite board games, but first, a word from my legal advisor.
Thank you, Angela. It should be noted that the following list is based entirely on Angela's subjective experiences. So if your favorite game is not listed, share it with us down in the comments below so that we may try it in the future, because I'm sure it's a very good game and quite a lot of fun to try. But until then, let's move on with the list. Yes, thank you very much. Ha!
I lose more legal advisors that way. But as he said, let's go ahead and get on with the list, and starting with number 5.
All right, before we get into my number 5 choice for this list, I want to go over some of the things that helped me choose what was on this list, and there's about 4 major things. The first of which is nostalgia, because there are definitely a couple of games on here where I picked them because they were probably some of the first games that I played that I really enjoyed and sort of brought me into the hobby, so they have a place on this list. There's also a bit of a recency bias because there's a couple of games on here that are relatively new, actually one in particular that is super new that I'm absolutely loving and I need to share it with you guys, so it made it onto the list as well. Now, the 2 other major factors that help me choose things on this list are aesthetics, because I paint a lot of miniatures, I collect a lot of miniatures as well, and I collect a ton of board games, even though I don't necessarily have time to play all of them. And one of the reasons for that is because I find board games to be some gorgeous pieces of art. And so I just like collecting them. Aesthetics is a huge deal for me. If a game looks pretty, I tend to be more interested in it. And then the final thing, and probably the most important thing of what allowed some of these games to get onto this list, is whether or not I like the mechanics and found it fun to play. Because, if it's a top 10 or a top 5 list, not top 10, top 5 list, I want to like playing these games, right? So without further ado, let's start with Railroad Inc., which is my number 5 pick. Now, I picked this one because I wanted to have something on the list that was relatively inexpensive, because a lot of the games on here are a little bit more on the expensive side. And this is, I think, $20. It's pretty inexpensive, and it's a really easy game to teach and learn. Basically, you have 4 dice that you'll roll each round, and starting on this gridded board here that you have, starting on these edges, you'll basically want to connect your pieces and make a pathway, a railroad network, and a road network as well, through your board until you filled it or can't go anymore. I think there's a specific number of rounds, actually. It's been a little while since I played this one. And that's basically it. It's really easy, very low energy, but very enjoyable to play. You can take this game with you because it's very portable. Like, this is the box it comes in. It closes up really nicely. It's magnetically sealed. So you can just bring this game anywhere. You can take it to like a coffee shop or a board game cafe, although they may already have it there for you to play. You can take it, on a picnic, when you're traveling, going to a convention, so that you have something to do while you're waiting in that that insane line to get into the dealer's room or whatever show that you're wanting to see or event you're wanting to do. It has a lot of flexibility there for being able to travel with. And then because it is so easy to teach, you can kind of just teach it to anyone very quickly and get playing, and it goes relatively quickly. It's not a very long game, so you can get a couple games in, or just, like I said, while you're waiting for dinner or something, get a round in, and then move on with yourself, and it's all great. And it's gorgeous. Like, look at this board. You've got this great aesthetic on the back. It's just a beautiful game, and it comes in a couple different colors, actually. This is the blue version, which is my preferred one, but there's also a blazing red edition, and I actually think later this year, they're coming out with 2 new versions of the game through a different company, because I think it was the brand changed. It used to be Cool Mini or Not, but I believe it's Horrible Games now or something like that. I can't remember the brand, but it's being updated. But there's 2 new games, and they're going to be called Railroad Inc. Challenge, which I don't know what's going to be making them different yet. I haven't looked fully into it, but I'm very, very interested because I really like spatial puzzle games. There's just something that I really just enjoy playing with. And I want to know, because this is already a really fun, light little challenge in itself, I want to know what they're doing to add a greater challenge. And they're adding 2 new colors. It's going to be a yellow box and a green box. So they have this really nice, just vibrant color palette, which if you've seen anything on this channel with how I like to paint, I like to use bright, bold colors. So it's right up my aesthetic. And I just love this little game. moving on to my number 4 pick for my list, and that is My City. This is the one that has my recency bias. If you have been following me on Instagram or Twitter, you've probably been seeing me post about this game. I have played, I think, 6 now chapters of the 8 that are in the box, which there's 3 episodes in each, like basically 3 game sessions in each. So that's what, math is not my strong suit right now. 24? No, yes, 24. So I've played like 24 games of this so far. I will honestly probably play another 3 sometime later today after I'm done with this recording. And I absolutely adore this game. Let me explain to you very briefly kind of how it works, because it's a legacy game and I don't want to spoil too much, but I do want to give you the basics. This, much like Railroad Inc., is a little bit of a spatial puzzle game. You are going to draw a card from a deck each time. It's going to have a picture of a piece on it. You're going to find that piece on your board, and then starting next to the river, you're going to place that piece, and then you're going to build out through your city. And each time you do, you have to make sure that the pieces touch. And basically that is the very lowest end of how to play this game. The thing that I like about this is with each episode, new mechanics are introduced. You are basically having to change how you're thinking about how you're placing your pieces, because while you're definitely wanting to fill all your spaces and everything, there's other objectives that you're wanting to accomplish that score you points. And my husband and I have been playing this, like I said, for the last couple of days, and we played a lot of it, and we have been neck and neck the entire time. It has been an absolute joy to play this game. We look forward to it every day, honestly. Basically being able to open up these envelopes and seeing what new mechanics are going to be in there, how the things are going to change. It's like playing so many different games of a mechanic that I like that focus basically on specific rule sets, and I find that incredibly fascinating for legacy style games. This is not the first legacy game that I've played, but it's definitely the one that I've played through the longest. And I've actually not played some of the major ones. Like I've actually never played the Pandemic Legacy games, even though they are one of the ones that sort of really emphasize that mechanic within games. But I love how this game functions, basically. My only actual complaint about it, despite the fact that it is on this list, is I wish the theming was a little bit different. I do, because it's a city builder, which is very fun, but honestly, I wish it had, even if it had been like medieval themed or sci-fi city themed, like I don't mind the city building aspect. It's just that the buildings themselves are kind of dull and sort of generic, and I wish it had just a little bit more pop to it, because it's a gorgeously colored game, and I absolutely love this board. So you have this side, which is what you play on when you're doing the legacy version, and then when you're finished, the beautiful thing about this game is it actually has an Eternity version. This is something that a lot of legacy games are starting to do now, but they really hadn't been doing previously, where you can go back and once you finish the legacy game, you can play it like it would be just a normal game. And I find that brilliant, because the one issue with legacy games is because you're putting stickers and changing things and manipulating the board, in certain legacy games you like destroy components and that kind of stuff. And because of that, it completely changes your board and you can't really play it from the start again. With this, it gives you an opportunity to be like, okay, we're not going to have literally everything that we had while you were doing the legacy version, but we're going to give you the most enjoyable components of that, or what I assume is what they picked. I haven't actually played the Eternity version yet, but I assume that they're going to pick like the funnest mechanics and put it into this version so that you can just keep playing it afterwards. And then you can always flip your board back over and, you know, reminisce about, oh, the glory days of building your town, because you do get to name it and all that stuff. Hobbyville is doing quite well right now. I can't wait to finish it up.
Oh, hey, didn't see you guys there. Well, while you're here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video.
My number 3 pick is Time Stories, including all of its expansions and the newer versions of it, but this game definitely wins me on aesthetics a lot. I adore the way that this game looks. It plays really interestingly, and let's talk about that for a brief moment. So this is a narrative-driven cooperative game where you are basically playing as time agents who are going to various locations and periods in time, and sometimes I think alternate realities, because there is like a fantasy place like expansion that you go to, which I don't actually remember how they tie that into the time aspect. So I think there's also just world jumping and stuff, like universe jumping and everything. But you go through and you're basically solving some sort of mystery or having an adventure or that kind of stuff. And the stories are really cool. And each expansion takes you and adds new mechanics to the core game and tries to do something different, which I really, really like. And each of the expansions that I've played have been really fun. I think I've gone through at least, I want to say 5 of them, in like the main game, and then I think 4 expansions, and then I think that's correct. I don't remember specifically, but I played a bunch of it. Now, it does have a little bit of a limited replayability because once you've sort of solved the mystery or, found the solution to the narrative that you're trying to complete, you probably don't want to necessarily go back and play it again because you'll just solve it really fast, and it's not really a challenge anymore, and it doesn't have quite the same joy of like that first exploration of the game has. So, which is why they have all these great expansions, because it adds new stories and continues them on. And there is a very lightly connected overarching story in the main game that will travel through the main, I think it's the first 9 expansions or something like that. And then what they started doing is they had a new version come out that does not require you to have the base game anymore to be able to play, because you used to have to have this board in order to play any of the expansions and all of these really cool chunky pieces, which, by the way, these are the fancy versions of these pieces that are semi-transparent that I just had to pick up when I saw that they came out, because it was a random promotional item that does not come in the core game. But I really liked the way these looked, and because I love this pure white, very Apple honestly looking board in that sci-fi feel, I don't know, it really worked for me. I had to pick up those acrylic pieces. My dice unfortunately are fading a little bit. That is a bit of a shame. But regardless of that, the aesthetics are still gorgeous, the gameplay is brilliant, and the new versions don't require this board. They're actually all standalone and don't actually connect to each other. And I actually think for this game, that's probably going to work really well. I have not actually played either of the 2 expansions yet. It's on my list of things that I want to try to get done this year, because it's actually been a very long time since I played Time Stories. We want to restart it because it's been so long. I don't actually remember, I know the basic premise of the story that comes in this, but I do not remember at all the solution. So I really want to pick it up again, try it out, because it is one of those games that you step away from it for a while, you forget what you've played, and you can go back to it quite easily. But otherwise, it is just gorgeous to lay out and fun to look at. Betrayal at House on the Hill is my number 2 spot, because this is, I think, one of the first board games I played that wasn't just your classic sort of family Hasbro or Mattel style games like Monopoly, Clue, those kinds of things. I was at Gamers Guild at my college, and I think that was the first time I ever played this game, and I fell in love with it. And then they came out with a whole bunch of different versions of it. There's a Baldur's Gate version. There is a Scooby-Doo version, which is the only one that I have not tried yet, but I really am very interested in it, because honestly, I think it is a fantastic way to thematically introduce your kids to a sort of narrative-ish driven horror asymmetrical game, where it's still kid-friendly enough for them, because it's Scooby-Doo themed, and I think just that theming just feels like it's gonna fit Betrayal super well. So when I found out about it, I was amazed. I want to pick it up, I just haven't yet. But the true standout for me for this game is actually the Legacy version. While I do love this classic version, as you can kind of tell, this is a well-worn, well-loved copy. I believe this is my husband's original copy, and we've had it forever. We'll never get rid of this game, no matter how warped some of these pieces get. But the Legacy version of this is by far my favorite, mostly because we kind of got around the fact that you need 3 people at minimum to play this game, which is the one disadvantage of the fact that right now we really can't play it with most people because, quarantine and all that stuff. We're still under lockdown, can't really see people. So not normally something you can play, but the Legacy version, we sort of had a workaround where each of us took on 2 characters, and then when one of us became the betrayer, we would just give whatever character wasn't that character to the other person, and then the traitor almost never wins, which is the one disadvantage to doing it this way, but it still allows us to experience the story of it, which is brilliant, because if you are not familiar with the Legacy version, it's one of the first Legacy games that did what My City did, that we talked about earlier, where you can actually play it as normal Betrayal at House on the Hill once you've finished. And I love the fact that Legacy games are doing that. I talked about this already. It makes me really happy, because it means that when you're spending your hard-earned money to pick up these games, because let's face it, board games are not necessarily an inexpensive hobby. It means that you're not being like, oh, well, I can only play this once or a couple of times. I mean, obviously you don't play legacy games once, you play them like 30 times because they have an, progressive thing that you're going through and everything. But you can actually continue to play it or decide to just play it normal with other people that aren't your main group that you're doing the legacy format with. And that's just brilliant, and I absolutely adore it. Now, I realized I haven't actually explained what you're doing in this game yet, so let me go ahead and rewind a little bit and actually talk about this. Betrayal at House on the Hill is an asymmetrical game where basically everybody in the group is starting out working together. You guys have all decided to go to this haunted house of sorts for some reason, because none of you seem to be related and you're this like ramshackle group of kids and adults and everything. It's very odd, but you guys have gone to this house, you're exploring it, and everything is going great until the omens start occurring. And then when you hit a certain number of omens, the traitor, the betrayal occurs. Somebody becomes a traitor, and then it's a versus game, and it's the group versus that person who has become the traitor. Hence why you can see why if the person who is running all of the good guy characters and the person who's running the traitor are just one individual people, the traitor has a huge disadvantage, because the people who are, making all the other decisions, the survivors, they know exactly what they're going to be doing because it's all one mind thinking about it. But that's why you want to normally play this game with 3 to, I think, 6 people. And it is my go-to of like, okay, we have a big group together. We want to play something that is super easy to basically explain, really great, and is different every time, because there's like 50 scenarios, I believe, in the base game, and then Widow's Wake, which is the expansion for the base game, adds, I think, another 50 scenarios. So that's 100 different things that you could be as the traitor. And it's really basic stuff like werewolf, vampire, and that kind of stuff, as well as like weird things that go more Cthulhu, or, sometimes the house just attacks you. I think there's been one time where I think the house just decided, I don't like any of you, and it tried to collapse in on us and we had to escape or whatever. I don't think we made it. Yeah, I really don't think we made it. I'm pretty sure we died in that one. That happens a lot, but that's kind of the fun of the game. You can just constantly go back to it. It's typically gonna be a new situation, and even if you get an old situation, you can just kind of decide, I'm gonna do a different one and have it work really well, because it's just that good. And one last thing that I will say about this is that this is the game that I feel like I have talked to the most people, and almost always this ends up somewhere on the, man, but Betrayal is so good, I think I might have to put it on my at least top 10. If you haven't played it and you have a group that you can play it with, definitely pick it up, because it is just brilliant. But before we get to number 1, I wanted to talk about a couple of honorable mentions. And we're going to start with One Deck Dungeon. This is a cute little deck building, or not deck building game. This is a cute little deck of cards where you basically go through the dungeon and you're rolling dice and you're basically doing a dungeon delve with a single deck of cards. It travels super well. I really, really enjoy it. It can play solo or up to 2 players. If you get either another copy of this or its expansion, you can actually play it up to 4 players. And again, this is just one that I travel a lot with because it plays super easy, it's cooperative, and it's just very fast paced and easy to pull in, out and then put back away. It's a great little one. Then there's Root, which is on this list because I haven't actually played that much of Root yet, and I've actually only played the digital version, but I own most of the physical copy because I kickstarted it and everything, because it just is absolutely gorgeous. Like, not only do I really like what I have played for the mechanics already so far, which is an asymmetrical strategy game that I'm not gonna really go into the details of, because like I said, I've not played enough of it to actually tell you fully how everything works, but if you ever wanted to wage war with cute, adorable woodland creatures with amazing wood pieces, a gorgeous board, and just the best freaking art style, just Root is going to be for you. It is gorgeous. All the expansions are gorgeous. Honestly, everything that Leader makes as a game, I think that's how it's pronounced. If I'm mispronouncing it, let me know down in the comments. But everything that this company makes, I love art-wise. They have, like, whoever their in-house artists are, just they are so good. I cannot get over how just gorgeous the game is, let alone the fact that it plays brilliantly. And then, because this is my list and I am a miniatures fan, I had to, of course, include on my honorable mentions Kingdom Death monster, which I wish I could play more of. I don't feel like I have the space for, which is odd, I know, because I play 40K in my house, which also requires a lot of space, but like, I don't know, this just has a particular way that I want to set it up when I want to play it, and I don't currently have a good place to, like, where I feel like I can set it all up. Plus, I am mildly terrified to build all of the actual miniatures for it because they are delicate, resin, gorgeous, and I'm really afraid of like breaking them or screwing them up. So it's one of those games where like, I love it. I love I love the way it plays. I love everything about it. It fits me to a T on an aesthetic level. It's dark, it's gothic, it has some anime pinup girls in it. It's just so good, right up my alley. It's just also terrifying to actually want to pull out and play because it's got such delicate pieces and I just don't know what I'm going to do with them all. But one day I'm gonna build some more of these Kingdom Death miniatures. One day I'll paint some more of them. And then I'll have a really, really gorgeous looking game to just spread out and play on the table one day. And it's gonna be amazing. But that has been my honorable mentions. Let's now move on to number 1. And here it is, my number 1 game, Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. Now, I'm just gonna scoot some of these aside because as you can notice, I own like all of it. I own the entire current 2nd Edition catalog for this game because it is probably the one game that will always end up being on this list no matter how else the list may end up changing because let's face it, these top 5 lists for board games especially kind of change every time you play new games because you're like, oh man, I really like that one. But Mansions is one game that I constantly can go back to. It is a narrative-driven cooperative game that is helped run by an app, which is one of the things that I actually really, really like about it. Fantasy Flight has done this for a number of their games, and a lot of other game companies are starting to do it as well, where they are basically providing setup and some rules and keeping track of certain things through apps now. And Mansions is one of the first games where I experienced that, and it changed my gaming experience. When we played it, basically, it saves so much time. One of the things that I think really stops people from sometimes playing board games is the setup portion and the teardown portion, because big games like Mansions or like Gloomhaven or like various other big box games like Twilight Imperium, like those kinds of things, they take a really long time to set up. They take sometimes a long time to teach. And then the game sessions themselves can sometimes be very long, and then it takes forever to put it all away. So it just becomes this really big experience, right? And if you don't necessarily want that, Mansions gives you that big box experience where you get that like long game session and everything with a little bit more of an expedited setup process, takedown process, and also it handles the app that handles like keeping track of monster health and that kind of stuff, which just makes everything a lot more focused on the parts of the game that you really want to be doing, which is the solving the mystery of whatever Cthulhu thing is happening and trying to survive and not go totally bonkers insane, because it's a horror game and it's a Cthulhu game and there's a sanity mechanic and you're always dying or going insane in a Call of Cthulhu game. So, but that's kind of one of the reasons that I like it, because it has that replayability. You can kind of go back and re-challenge yourself with the same missions because the monsters are brutal and they will kill you if you try to confront them, so you have to figure out other ways to solve everything. There's some light puzzle solving that the app also handles, which is nice because it limits the number of components that you actually need for the game, because let's face it, like board games, like I said, can be kind of expensive. One of the things that makes them so expensive is the amount of components and cardboard and plastic and all of that stuff that you end up getting in them. So having certain things like a puzzle, which tend to be, say, like sliding mechanics or that kind of stuff, like they're not really abstract strategies, but or abstract puzzles or anything like that, but it works better on the app because you don't have to have all these fiddly pieces like what First Edition had. If you've ever played First Edition Mansions of Madness, from my understanding, there were a lot more extra components because of the puzzle solving mechanic in the game, which is really cool, but adds to that cost. And this game already is pretty expensive because it comes with a lot of really nice, chunky, gorgeous miniatures that I really, really want to get painting sometime. So actually, if you are interested in seeing me paint some of those, or any of the board games that have miniatures in them, if you want to see that kind of stuff, let me know down in the comments, because I definitely am interested in getting some of my board game miniatures painted up in the same way that I get my Warhammer miniatures painted up. But that has been my number 1 game. Mansions of Madness is just, it's just so good to me, you guys. Let me know what your number 1 game would be, or your top 5. I love hearing about what people are playing or what their favorites are, because it gives me an opportunity to find new things to explore and play with. Because, like I said, I like collecting things, I like seeing new games, and I like just hearing about them. So let me know your favorites. I have been Angela. You guys have been watching Hobby Night. Thank you guys so much. If you liked what you've seen here, make sure to hit the like button, to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and to share the video just so more people can see it. Anyways, I've been Angela. You guys have been watching Hobby Night, and I'll see you next time. Bye.